Hello and welcome to the Yorkshire Dales. I'm standing here in front of the amazing Ingleborough mountain, and behind we've got Whernside, and to the right we've got Pennygent. And we're here today not to climb these mountains, no, we're going to look at our very own mystery. Follow me. So today this place is a nature reserve, but 50 years ago it was a quarry, as you can see from the walls behind me. It would have been a really busy, noisy place. And if you go back 150 years, the whole of this area would be covered in navvies. Navvies are people working on the railways. They had villages and lots of houses, and they would be living there all the year through. Quite a wild place to do that, you'd think now. But our mystery today is not about that. Our mystery today is not 50 years ago, not 150 years ago, but more than 1,000 years ago. Come with me and see what we've got. So as you can see, the landscape behind me is covered in limestone pavement. It's not an easy place to navigate, let alone to find our mystery. So in the 1970s, Dr. Alan King looked at some photos from the sky, and from those aerial photos he saw 3 rectangles. Now this was really significant and important because one of those rectangles was quite long. And if you know anything about Viking history, you'll perhaps know that they tended to build their houses as long houses. As he went to look for this place, this is what he was thinking, that he'd found a Viking longhouse. Let's go and see if we can find it. So we're here! Ta-da! Can you see it? No? Well, perhaps we need to take to the air. So from the air we see 3 rectangles, 1 long and 2 squat. We're going to find out what those rectangles are in a minute, but I just want you to be able to spot them. So when Dr. King found this site, the first thing he would have to do is to map it out, and then they could get digging. But you may have noticed that behind me this is all grown over, and that is because archaeologists, they'll dig up very carefully, but then they have to put everything back. So usually when you go to a site like this, there isn't actually an awful lot to see, but they did uncover some really interesting treasures. And I'm going to talk you through those now. So I'm just opening the big grand front door. So there would have been a big doorway here. The walls are about this thick. And the archaeologists could tell from what was on the ground that this was the main entrance to the longhouse. And the path would have led back down to Ribble Head. Isn't it incredible that they can tell that just by what is in the ground? They could also tell that you came through the big doorway and there was a screen in front. So you would have had to turn right and then left to get into the longhouse. So we've got the grand entrance and we've got the big walls that we can still see now. But what evidence have we got for these people and how they lived? So the archaeologists found a number of things, and those things were really exciting. Now the first one I know that you'll love, because the first thing that they found was a sword. But not a fighting sword, I'm afraid. This sword was for weaving. So we know that in this house they did some weaving. It looks like a sword, but instead of fighting with it, you beat down the weft. So that was one thing they found. Another exciting find they found was just outside these walls, and they found an arrowhead. That arrowhead, again, not really probably for fighting, but this arrowhead would have been for hunting. And it gave us a clue, starting to give us a clue about the different landscape it would have been in those days, and the animals that would have been here. The final clue they found was a coin. That coin was buried quite deep into the walls. And that coin I'm not going to tell you about just now, because that will come at the end. So that was the evidence, but what about the things that we perhaps don't 100% know, but we think we know from other evidence elsewhere? Well, this building will have had a hearth in it, and it will have been the place where the family would sit round and eat in the evening and probably sleep. There would have been beds made of wood, but not massive planks of wood, because the trees that would have grown up here would have been small and spindly. There would have been mattresses, probably filled with straw, and this would have been the place where all the evening activities and some of the daytime activities would take place. Let's go and see some of the other buildings. So there quite possibly was a passageway that joined the longhouse to this building here. And this building here showed signs of perhaps being somewhere where the cooking took place. Come in and I'll show you. So in this building we have the entrance that we've just come through. And we have similarly thick walls, really thick, as wide as me, but perhaps not built quite as well as the longhouse over there. In the longhouse they had big boulders. This one, a little bit more scrappy. In this building they found some really interesting artefacts. They found kernstones. Now you probably don't know what a kernstone is. It is a circular stone about this big, and it's quite hard and quite rough. And you usually have two of them. And they grind them against each other, and in between they'll put some grain. And that is how they would make flour to make things like bread. So getting a clue of what this building could be. They also found a spindle whorl. A spindle whorl is a small circular piece of stone or clay, and it acts as a weight, and you use it when spinning. So again, joining that to what we found over in the longhouse, we're seeing that they were making some sort of textiles. And the other thing they found, not actually in the building, but over there, was a lot of bones. And that is really interesting, because that is telling you what sort of animals were here, what they ate, but also what the landscape was. It's showing you that some of the animals that they ate were woodland animals. Can you see any woodland? No, that's because it is all gone. The landscape has changed, and so has the climate, and so have the animals that lived here. So we're now coming up to the third building. So behind me we have the longhouse. To the right I've got what we think is the place that they did the cooking, and then we've got our third building over here. But this area in the middle, we've got no evidence for this, but most probably this would be where animals would be kept, and it would be fenced in and probably reasonably flat, clear area. Let's go into the last building. So we come to the last building, and the last building was not as well made as the other two. And in the building they found a few different things. They found a metal axe and a metal bell. That shows us that they had the ability to make things of metal. And they also found another hearth. So we think that this room was probably used for making metal as a blacksmith. And later on, much later on, a little furry animal helped out a little bit. It did some digging, and whilst it was digging, it dug up some charcoal. And that charcoal turned out to be the piece de resistance. It helped make sense of the whole settlement. Now you may remember earlier I told you about that coin. That coin turned out to be a Saxon coin, not a Viking coin as Alan King would have thought in the beginning. So that changed their thinking on the whole place. But with a coin you can't be 100% certain that that coin hadn't been dropped at a later time, even though it was deeply buried. But with the help of this little furry animal and that charcoal, they did a bit of carbon dating. And with that carbon dating and the coin, they can be pretty sure that this settlement was not Viking, but was Saxon. And that is the end of our mystery. Thank you for watching.